What you call thinking is, most of the time, not thinking at all. It's hiding, in the most intelligent-looking disguise there is. Running the conversation again, planning the move down to the detail, picturing exactly how it'll go. It feels like diligence, like you're being careful, being smart, doing the responsible pre-work. But watch what it actually produces. Nothing. You think, and the thing never happens. Because the thinking was never aimed at doing it, it was aimed at not having to. Stay, and you'll learn to tell the rehearsal from the life, to catch the exact moment thinking it through becomes the room you go into, so you never have to step onto the stage. I've lived whole relationships in my head. I've rehearsed a conversation so many times I genuinely felt like we'd already had it, and we hadn't, not once. I just worn a deep groove into my own skull and called it being thoughtful. Because there's something you've thought about for years and never touched. And it isn't that you lack clarity, you have more than enough. It's something else. It has a name. And once you hear it, you will not be able to unhear it in your own voice. Before I give you the name for it, the thing that turns thinking into hiding, one small thing. I put one of these out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and each one takes apart a habit you're a little too comfortable with. If you'd rather live it than rehearse it, subscribe. And like this if that empty stage already feels a bit too familiar. Now, my own rehearsal, and where it left me. For a long stretch of my life, most of the important things happened in one place, and it wasn't the world. It was the theater behind my eyes. There was a conversation I needed to have with someone, a real one, overdue, the kind that changes things. I had it, in my head, maybe 100 times. I knew my opening line. I knew where they'd flinch. I'd worked out 3 versions of how it might go and how I'd respond to each. I could feel it. And I never once had it out loud with the actual person in an actual room. There was a move I wanted to make, a change of direction, a real one. I planned it in extraordinary detail. I could tell you the plan right now, years later, because I ran it so many times it's carved in. I never took a single step toward it. There was a whole version of me that existed, capable, decisive, already living the better life, and he lived entirely inside my head and nowhere else on earth. And the entire time, I would have told you with a straight face that I was thinking it through. Being careful, being wise. I wasn't rushing into things like other people. I was considering. And that word, considering, felt so responsible that it never once occurred to me to ask what all that considering was actually for. But the planning was never the real damage. The plans weren't the problem. Somewhere along the way I'd done something quieter and much stranger. I'd moved in, I'd made the rehearsal my home, and started living there instead, and I did it without ever noticing the day I stopped visiting the real one. Here's the specific mistake, and it's a subtle one, because it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like being smart. I confused the vividness of the scene in my head with actually having done something. Think about how convincing a good rehearsal is. When I'd run that overdue conversation for the 20th time, it wasn't vague. I could see the person's face. I felt the nerves, and then the relief afterward. My body reacted like it was real. And here's the trap. That reaction leaves a residue. You walk away from a vivid rehearsal feeling lighter, like something got handled, like you made progress. So the pressure comes off. And when the pressure's off, you don't act. Why would you? It already feels done. I rehearsed that conversation so many times, I felt like we'd already had it. We hadn't. I'd just worn a groove into my own skull and mistaken the groove for a road. I made a whole video on I don't have time being fear wearing a calendar. This is its quieter, smarter twin. I'm still thinking it through is the exact same dodge in a better tailored coat. One bills the fear to your schedule. This one bills it to your intelligence, which is worse, honestly, because it lets you feel clever while you hide, instead of just busy. And that's the part that took me the longest to admit. The rehearsing wasn't a step toward the thing. It was the thing I was doing instead of the thing. A very sophisticated way of standing perfectly still. But I couldn't see any of that clearly. I couldn't see what all that rehearsing was actually for, until I finally learned its name. The name came from Jean-Paul Sartre, French philosopher, 1905 to 1980, one of the people who thought hardest about what it means to be free. And in a dense, brilliant book called Being and Nothingness, he described a move he called bad faith, mauvaise foi. It's a very specific kind of self-deception, the lie you tell to escape your own freedom. His famous example is a waiter. Sartre watches a cafe waiter who's a little too much of a waiter, the exaggerated precision, the balance of the tray, the performance of waiterness. And Sartre's point is that the man is playing the role so completely because it lets him hide inside it. If I'm just being a waiter, I don't have to face that I'm a free person who is choosing, right now, every second, what to do with my life. The role is a hiding place from freedom. And here's where it went straight through me. Rehearsing is bad faith with a graduate degree. I'm still thinking it through as a role, exactly like the waiters. It lets me hide inside a respectable posture, the careful one, the considered one, so I never have to stand in the open and admit that I am free to act, and therefore responsible for not acting. Sartre had another line for it, and it's the one that actually hurt. He said existence precedes essence, meaning you are not some fixed inner self that you'll express someday. You are the sum of your acts. Only your acts, which means the capable, decisive version of me who lived in my head. By Sartre's account, he didn't exist. He never acted. He wasn't a real self. He was a character I was writing instead of becoming, and modern psychology says the same thing in colder language. Researchers who study rumination, that mental replaying, found it does the opposite of what it promises. It feels like problem solving. It isn't. It keeps you stuck in the bad feeling, worsens your thinking, and actively interferes with taking action. Now, I want to be careful here, because for some people that looping is real anxiety, real suffering, and that deserves care, not a lecture. But for a lot of us, most of the time, the loop isn't an illness, it's an alibi. And naming it didn't fix mine. Understanding a trap and stepping out of it are two different acts, and the second one, the one that finally moved me, came from somewhere I didn't choose. Quick, honest step out. A video that tells you your thinking is avoidance, instead of selling you a productivity system to optimize the avoidance, doesn't do well with the algorithm that rewards the productivity systems. It exists because people fund it directly, not because a feed pushed it. And that, right there, is the small real act I'm describing. Making one actual thing and putting it into the world instead of rehearsing 10. If it's worth something to you, the Buy Me a Coffee link's in the description. Pay what you want or nothing and stay. Now, back to it, because the turn, the day I finally saw the empty stage, is next. And it wasn't a decision. It was worse than that. The turn wasn't a moment of courage. It was a door closing. Quietly, while I was still thinking. One of those things I'd rehearsed for years. I won't tell you which. It doesn't matter. You have your own. Reached the point where it simply wasn't possible anymore. Not dramatically. No slammed door. The window for it just quietly closed, the way they do, and I was still standing there holding my beautifully detailed plan, fully prepared for a thing that could no longer happen. And in that specific sick moment, I saw it, not the lost chance, something bigger and worse behind it. I saw the stage. All of it, at once. Years of it. I had been performing my life, rehearsing relationships, rehearsing the career, rehearsing the braver version of me, night after night after night, to a theater with no one in it. No audience. No opening night. Just a man alone under a light, running his lines with total conviction, in a room where the seats were empty and had always been empty. I hadn't been preparing to live. I'd been living, if you can even call it that, entirely in the rehearsal, and I had nothing in my hands to show for any of it, because a rehearsal, no matter how good, leaves nothing behind. That's the whole definition of a rehearsal. That was the turn, not a decision to change. just the unbearable sight of the empty stage, and the understanding that every night I spent rehearsing was a night the real thing didn't happen and never would. So I stopped trusting that feeling, the warm, convincing feeling of I'm thinking about it, and I started doing one small, real, embarrassingly tiny thing instead. Now, when I catch the rehearsal starting, the loop spinning up, the scene playing for the third time, I don't try to stop thinking. You can't, and trying just makes another loop. Instead, I do the smallest real act that breaks it. Not the leap. The tiniest possible move that exists in the actual world instead of my head. I have a rule, and it's crude, and it works. If I've thought about something more than twice, the next move is not a third think. It's an act, however small. I send the message instead of drafting it again. I say the sentence out loud to the person, not to the mirror. I make the call. I write the one line down where someone could actually read it. The size doesn't matter at all. What matters is that it exists somewhere other than my skull, that it leaves the stage and lands in the world, where it can't be unhappened. And there's something strange that happens the moment you do. A real act, even a tiny one, gives you real information, the actual person's actual reaction, not the 14 versions you scripted. And real information is the one thing a rehearsal can never give you, no matter how many times you run it. You can rehearse for a decade and no less than one clumsy real attempt teaches you in a minute. But I'm not going to sell you just take action, because that's not what this gave me, and it's not what this is. That phrase is a coach yelling at a scared person, and it misses the whole point. So let me be honest about what actually changed, because it's smaller and less flattering than a transformation. I did not become a man of action. I want to be clear, because this is exactly where a video like this is supposed to tell you I now move decisively and my rehearsing days are behind me. They're not. I still think too much. I still catch myself 3 scenes deep into a conversation that hasn't happened. The theater didn't close. I just stopped being able to live in it without knowing that's what I'm doing. That's the whole change, and it's quieter than a cure. The rehearsal used to be invisible to me. It felt like thinking, like being responsible, and I believed it completely. Now it has a name and a smell. I feel the loop start, and a part of me goes, there's the stage again. I can still choose to walk out onto it and run my lines. Sometimes I do, but I can't pretend anymore that it's the same thing as living. The hiding place stopped being a hiding place the moment I could see its walls. And I'll be straight, some of what I saw when I stepped off that stage, I'd rather not have seen. The count of it. How many real years I spent in the rehearsal of a life instead of the life. That number doesn't feel like wisdom. It feels like a loss you don't get back. This isn't a glow-up. It's just a man who can no longer lie to himself with the word thinking. So if you live more in the rehearsal than in the room, and by now you probably know if you do, here's the part that's actually yours. So I'm not going to give you a system, no action framework, no 5-step method to stop overthinking. That's just a new script to rehearse, a way to be busy planning to stop planning. You'd run it in your head 12 times and never use it. We both know that. Here's the only thing. Right now, there's something you've thought about for years. You know exactly what it is. It arrived in your mind the second I said it. The conversation, the message, the change, the person, the thing that lives, fully formed and fully detailed, on your stage, and nowhere else in the world. You don't have to make the leap. That's not the ask, and honestly, the leap is just the biggest version of the rehearsal, one more scene you can run forever. The ask is smaller and much harder. Take one real piece of it off the stage this week. Send the actual message. Say the one sentence to the actual person. Make it exist somewhere your mind can't reach in and unhappen it. Not to fix your life. Just to prove to yourself that you still can, that there's a door out of the theater, and it opens. Because you already know the difference. Under the warm feeling of I'm still thinking about it, you have always known when you were preparing, and when you were just hiding somewhere it's too dark for anyone, including you, to see you not living. The stage was never your life. It was the room you went into to avoid it. And the only question left is how many more nights you're going to spend performing to those empty seats before you finally walk out and do one real thing where someone, even just you, can actually see it happen. So here's the challenge, and it's smaller than the leap you keep rehearsing. This week, take one thing off the stage. The message you've been drafting in your head for months. Send it. The sentence. Say it out loud to the person, not to the mirror. One thing that finally exists, somewhere other than your skull. That single real act will teach you more than the last 20 minutes did. And in the comments, name the thing you've thought about for years and never touched. Just name it. Writing it down is the first time it leaves the rehearsal and lands somewhere real, and reading a whole wall of them is its own strange relief. Proof you were never the only one performing to an empty house. That sentence costs something to type. That's how you'll know it's the true one. Send this to the person who's been figuring it out for a decade. They'll feel it. And if you want work that keeps calling the rehearsal exactly what it is, instead of flattering it, the link's in the description. Not charity. Fuel for the kind of thing someone actually made, instead of just planning to. I'll be here Wednesday.